Aloha's. Chapter 15. Let's go. Now to return to Tom and Becky's share in the picnic. They tripped along the murky aisles with the rest of the company, visiting the familiar wonders of the cave. Wonders dubbed with rather over-descriptive names, such as the drawing room, the cathedral, Aladdin's palace, and so on. Presently, the hide-and-seek frolicking began, and Tom and Becky engaged in it with zeal until the exertion began to some fireworks. Um, began to grow a trifle wearisome. Then they wandered down a sinuous avenue, holding their candles aloft and reading the tangled webwork of names and dates and mottos with which the rocky walls had been frescoed in candle smoke. Still drifting along and talking, they scarcely noticed that they were now in a part of the cave whose walls were not frescoed. Frescoed? They smoked their own names under an overhanging shelf and moved on. Presently, they came to a place where a little stream of water trickling over a ledge and carrying a limestone sediment with it had, in the slow dragging ages, formed a laced and ruffled Niagara in gleaming stone. Tom squeezed his small body behind it in order to illuminate it for Becky's gratification. He found that it curtained a sort of steep natural stairway, which was enclosed between narrow walls, and at once the ambition to be a discoverer seized him. Becky responded to his call, and they made a smoke mark for future guidance and started upon their quest. They wound this way and that, far down into the secret depths of the caves, made another mark, and branched off in search of novelties to tell the upper world about. In one place, they found a spacious cavern from whose ceiling depended a multitude of shining stalactites of the length and circumference of a man's leg. They walked all about it, wondering and admiring, and presently left it by one of the numerous passages that opened into it. They shortly brought them. This shortly brought them to a cavern whose walls were supported by many fantastic pillars, formed by the joining of great stalactites and stalagmites together. Under the roof, vast knots of bats had packed themselves together, thousands in a bunch. The lights disturbed the creatures, and they came flocking down by the hundreds, squeaking and darting furiously at the candles. Tom knew their ways and the danger of this sort of conduct. He seized Becky's hand and hurried her into the first corridor that offered, and none too soon, for a bat struck Becky's light out with its wing while she was passing. Light out what? Oh, bless me, sorry. For a bat struck out Becky's For a bat struck Becky's light out with its wing while she was passing out of the cabin. So many, so many. Sorry. Oh my god. Oh, what the heck's going on with me? Oh. Sorry. What the heck? Ah. Oh my god, am I sick? I better not be sick. How many sneezes is that? Oh my gosh, dude. Ah. The bats chased the children a good distance, but the fugitives plunged into every new passage that offered, and at last got rid of the perilous things. Oh my god. There you. The cats are staring each other down. Yes, no. Ah. The bats. Oh, yeah. Tom found a subterranean lake shortly, which stretched its dim length away until its shape was lost in the shadows. He wanted to explore its borders, but concluded that it would be best to sit down and rest a while first. Now, for the first time, the deep stillness of the place laid a chimney hand, clammy. Now, for the first time, the deep stillness of the place laid a clammy hand upon the spirits of the children. Becky said, "Why, I didn't notice, but it seems ever so long since I heard any of the others. Come to think, Becky, we are away down below them, and I don't know how far north or south or east or whichever it is. We couldn't hear them here." Becky grew apprehensive. "I wonder how long we've been down here, Tom. We better start back." "Yes, I reckon we better. Can you find the way, Tom? It's all mixed up crookedness to me. I reckon I could find it, but then the bats. If they put both our candles out, it will be an awful fix. Let's try not to go through there." They started through the corridor and traversed it in silence a long way, glancing at each new opening to see if there was anything familiar about the look of it. But they were all strange. Every time Tom made an exclamation, Becky would watch his face for an encouraging sign, and he would say cheerily, "Oh, it's all right. This ain't the one, but we'll come to it right away." He felt less and less hopeful with each failure, and presently began to turn off to diverging avenues at sheer random. He still said it was all right, but there was a sudden leading dread at his heart that the words that had lost their ring and sounded just as if he had said, "All is lost." Becky clung to his side in an anguish of fear. At last, she said, "Oh, Tom, never mind the bets. Let's go back that way. We seem to get worse off all the time." Tom stopped. "Listen," said he. Profound silence, silence so deep that even their breathings were conspicuous. Tom shouted. The call went echoing down the aisles and died out in the distance in a faint sound that resembled a ripple of mocking laughter. Oh, don't do it again, Tom. It is too horrid, said Becky. It is horrid, but I better. Becky, they might hear us, you know? And he shouted again. The might was even a chiller horror than the ghostly laughter. Uh, It so confessed a perishing hope. The children stood still and listened, but there was no result. Tom turned upon the backtrack at once and hurried his steps. It was but a little while before a certain indecision in his manner revealed another fearful fact to Becky. He could not find his way back. Oh, Tom, you didn't make any marks. Becky, I was such a fool. I never thought we might want to come back. No, I can't find the way. It's all mixed up. Tom, we're lost. Oh, why did we leave the others? She sank to the ground and burst into a frenzy of crying that Tom was appalled. And she's such a frenzy of crying that Tom was appalled. He sat down by her. Put his arms around her. She buried his she buried her face in his bosom, and she she buried her face in his bosom. She clung to him. She poured out her terrors, and the fire echoes turned them all to jeering laughter. Tom begged her to pluck up hope again, and she said she could not. He fell to blaming and abusing himself for getting her into this situation. This had a better effect. She said she would try to hope again. She would get up and follow wherever he might lead, if only he would not talk like that anymore. For he was no more to blame than she said. So they moved on again, simply at random, moving in some direction, in any direction, might at least bear fruit. To sit down was to invite death. But at last, Becky's frail limbs refused to carry her father. She sat down. Tom rested with her, and they talked of home and the friends there, and the comfortable beds, and above all, the light. Fatigue bore, Fatigue bore so heavily upon Becky that she drowsed off to sleep. Tom was grateful. He sat looking into her drawn face and saw it grow smooth and natural under the influence of pleasant dreams. And by, a smile dawned and rested there. The peaceful face reflected somewhat of peace and healing into his own spirit, and his thoughts wandered away to dreamy memories. While he was deep in his musings, Becky woke up with a little laugh, but it was stricken dead upon her lips. A groan followed. Oh, how could I sleep? I wish I never had waked. No, I don't, Tom. Don't look so. I won't say it again. They rose up and wandered along, hand in hand and hopeless. And a long time after this, they could not tell how long, Tom said they must go softly and listen for dripping water. They must find a spring. They found one presently and sat down, and Tom fastened his candle to the wall in front of him and with some clay. Becky said, Tom, I am so hungry. Tom took something out of his pocket. Do you remember this? Becky almost smiled. Is our wedding cake, Tom? Yes. I wish it was as big as a barrel, for it's all we've got. I saved it from the picnic for us to dream on, Tom, the way grown up people do with wedding cake. But it'll be our. She drew up the sentence where it was. Tom divided the cake, and Becky ate with good appetite, while he nibbled at his moiety. There was an abundance of cold water to finish the feast with. By and by, Becky suggested that they move on again. Tom was silent a moment. Then he said, Becky, can you bear it if I tell you something? Becky's face paled, but she thought she could. Well then, Becky, we must stay here, with his water to drink. That little piece is our last candle. Becky gave loose to tears, but at length she said, Tom, they'll miss us and hunt for us. Maybe they're hunting now. I reckon maybe they are. I hope they are. When would they miss us, Tom? Well, they get back to when they get back to the boat, I reckon. Tom, it might be dark. Would they notice we hadn't come? I don't know. But anyway, your mother would miss you as soon as they got home. A frightened look in Becky's face made Tom see that he had made a blunder. Becky was not to have gone home that night. The Sabbath morning might be half spent before Mrs. Thatcher discovered that Becky was not at Mrs. Harper's. The children fastened their eyes upon the bit of candle and watched it melt pitilessly, pitilessly away. Saw the half-inch of wick stand alone at last. Saw the feeble flame rise and fall, climb the thin column of smoke, linger at its top for a moment, and then the horror of utter darkness reigned. After what seemed a mighty stretch of time, they both awoke out of a dead stupor of sleep and resumed their miseries once more. Tom said it might be Sunday now. Now, maybe Monday. He said that they must have been missed long ago, and no doubt the search was going on. He would shout, and maybe someone would come. He tried it, but in the darkness, the distant echoes sounded so hideously that he tried it no more. Hours wasted away, and the hunger came to torment the captives again. A portion of Tom's half cake was left. They divided and ate it, but they seemed hungrier than before. By and by, Tom said, "Shh, do you hear it? Do you hear that?" They both held their breaths and listened. There was a sound like the faintest far off shout. Instantly, Tom answered him, and leading Becky by the hand, started groping down the corridor in its direction. Presently, he listened again. Again, the sound was heard, and apparently a little nearer. "It's them," said Tom. "Come along, Becky. We're all right now." The joy of the prisoners was almost overwhelming. Their speed was slow, however, because pitfalls were common and had to be guarded against. They shortly came to one and had to stop. It might be 3 feet deep. It might be 100. There was no passing it at any rate. Tom got down on his breast and reached as far as he could. No bottom. They must stay there until the searchers came. They listened. Evidently, the distant shoutings were growing more distant. A moment or two more, and they had gone altogether. Tom whooped until he was hoarse. Was but it was of no use. The children groped their way back to the spring. They slept again and awoke famished and woe-stricken. Tom believed it must be Tuesday by this time. Now an idea struck him. There were some side passages. There were some side passages near at hand. It would be better to explore some of these than bear the weight of the heavy time in idleness. He took a kite line from his pocket, tied it at a projection, and he and Becky started. Tom in the lead, unwinding the line as he groped along. At the end of 20 steps, the corridor ended in a jumping off place. Tom got down on his knees and felt below, and then as far around the corner as he could reach with his hands. He made an effort to stretch yet a little further to the right, and at that moment, not 20 yards away, a human hand, holding a candle, appeared from behind a rock. Tom lifted up a glorious shout, and instantly the hand was followed by a body it belonged to. Injun Joe's. Tom was paralyzed. He was vastly gratified the next moment to see that the Spaniard take his heels out of sight. Tom wondered that Joe had not recognized the voice. And Nala Anjumani, Anjare. Tom wondered that Joe had not recognized his voice and come and killed him for testifying in court. But the echoes must have disguised the voice. He was careful to keep from Becky what it was he had seen. He told her he had only shouted for luck, but hunger and wretchedness rise superior to fears in the long run. Another tedious wait at the spring, and another long sleep brought changes. The children awoke, tortured with fear. Tom proposed to explore another passage. He felt willing to risk Injun and all other terrors. But Becky had sunk into a dreary apathy. She said she would wait now, where she was, and die. But she implored him to come back every little while and speak to her. And she made him promise that when the awful time came, he would stay by her, hold her hand until it was over. Tom kissed her, choking. Then he took a kite line in his hand and went groping down one of the passages in his hands and on his hands and knees, distressed with hunger and bodings of coming doom. And that's the end of the chapter. Oof. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you guys tomorrow or whenever the next stream is. I'll see you rather, not you guys.